The storm had been building all afternoon, rolling in off the coast like a siege line, and by nightfall Millbrook sounded like a war zone. Rain hammered the siding, gutters rattled like machine gun fire, and thunder shook the rafters. I sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee cooling between my hands, staring at the glow of my wife's phone. I hadn't gone looking to play detective. That's not who I am. But when a phone lights up at midnight and she leaves it face down, patterns you've been ignoring finally stop letting you sleep. One swipe, one passcode I'd seen her tap 100 times. And there it was. A thread of messages like rot beneath fresh paint. Can't wait to feel your hands on me again. Tonight was incredible. Next time at my place. Colin Reed, her boss. The guy with the custom suits and the Audi parked at the corner spot of their glass office downtown. I scrolled, each message like another nail through 12 years of marriage. 12 years of scraped knuckles, late nights, and holding her hand through moves, jobs, and funerals. All shrunk down to emojis and breathless lies. I set the phone down, not shaking, not breaking. My heart kicked like it wanted out, but my hands stayed steady on the table. That steadiness surprised me. It felt like someone else had taken the wheel inside me. Someone colder, harder, the man I used to be before compromise and patience had turned me into background noise in my own life. The front door slammed against the wind, and her heels clicked across the hardwood. Brooke Walker, walking headline. Hair still perfect despite the storm. Dress sharp enough to slice paper. Perfume announcing her from the foyer. She breezed in like the weather outside didn't exist. Coat slung over one arm. Phone already in her hand before she noticed it wasn't there. Hey, babe, she said without looking up. The way someone talks to a houseplant they assume will never answer back. Sorry I'm late. Work ran long. I picked up the phone from the table and held it where she could see the screen still open, still glowing with Colin Reed's name at the top. A flash of lightning lit the kitchen white, thunder rolling a second later like God was underlining the sentence for me. Her eyes froze. Then came the plays I'd learned by heart over the years. First, the outrage. You went through my phone? What the hell is wrong with you? Then the denial. It's not what it looks like. We're joking around. It's harmless. Finally, the frost. Her voice cooled, her eyes narrowed, and she crossed her arms like the guilty ones always do when cornered. You're pathetic. Snooping. Making up stories. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam my fist or throw the phone. I just slid my finger across the screen, tapped the share button, and forwarded the entire chain to Colin Reed's work email and to his wife, Lisa. Sent with attachments, receipts, timestamps. The phone lit up like an air raid siren within minutes. Calls, alerts, messages stacking one over the other until it sounded like the whole damn world was hunting her. She grabbed it, but I leaned back, took my mug, and sipped coffee slowly while the storm outside screamed. For months, maybe years, I'd been restless in my own house, uneasy without knowing why. Tonight the storm put a name to it. Not paranoia, not insecurity, just truth waiting for a lightning strike to make it visible. Brooke's face drained of its polish, panic cracking through the practiced mask. She started pacing, phone clutched tight, muttering excuses half to herself and half to me, but I'd stopped listening. I poured myself another coffee, steam curling into the kitchen air, and realized something I hadn't felt in a long damn time. Calm. Not happiness, not victory. Just the quiet steadiness of knowing the guessing was over, the waiting done. The storm rattled the windows, but inside, for the first time in months, I felt still. By morning the storm had blown east, leaving Millbrook washed clean and shining under a sky the color of steel. The gutters still dripped. The air carried that metallic scent only a hard rain leaves behind, and my shop smelled of sawdust and oil. It was the kind of morning where most men would sweep the floor, sharpen a blade, and get back to work. I was past that stage. Mike O'Connor showed up without asking, like he always did when the ground shifted under my feet. He's been my friend longer than Brooke had been my wife. 20 years of projects, late nights, busted knuckles, and shared beer. He walked in carrying a box of donuts like it was ammunition. You look like hell, he said, dropping the box on the bench. Didn't sleep much, I answered. still wiping down a wrench even though it was already clean. My hands needed something to do besides ball into fists. Mike didn't bother with small talk. He poured coffee from my thermos, sat down, and leaned his elbows on his knees. "So, Colin Reed, the guy with the Audi and the hair gel, that's the one. Figures." He chewed a bite of donut like it was jerky. "A man like that doesn't work late, he prowls late." We didn't talk about feelings. Not my style, not his. We talked about the consequences. Mike knew me well enough to skip the lecture about forgiveness or counseling or any of that soft landing crap. He could see I wasn't after catharsis. I was after balance. "Guy wants to act like a wolf in your yard," he said, brushing sugar off his hands. Time to remind him he's not top of the food chain. I cracked a smile for the first time since the night before. "You got something in mind?" Mike did. His cousin ran a seafood joint down by the docks, and after a quick call, we had a cooler full of shrimp shells, clam guts, and fish heads on loan. By noon, the cooler sat in the back of Mike's pickup, ice melting, the smell already turning heads on Main Street as we drove past. Colin Reed's silver Audi was easy to find. Downtown underground garage, same reserved spot with his name printed on a plaque. A man like that never hid. He wanted people to know what he drove, where he parked, who he thought he was. We rolled in quiet, just two mechanics in coveralls, cooler sliding easy on the dolly. No one questioned us. Who questions men who look like they belong with tools in hand? "Fast and surgical," Mike muttered as we popped the hood. We worked like clockwork. Shells tucked into the air vents, guts smeared inside panels, a few prime cuts hidden in the spare tire well. The kind of thing no detailer on earth could fully fix. A stink that would follow him like a shadow for weeks, maybe months. Every drive, every date, every client meeting, he'd carry the smell of his choices with him. On the underside of the hood, I took a marker and wrote one word small enough for the next mechanic to find it. Homewrecker. Juvenile? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. We shut everything clean, cooler empty, hands washed in the service sink. Mike tossed the gloves into the dumpster and gave me a look I'll never forget. Half grin, half battle cry. "That's one down," he said. I felt lighter walking out of that garage. Not because the job was done, but because for the first time in months I wasn't the one swallowing disrespect. Colin Reed had made his play. Now he'd live with the stink of it. Back at the shop, Mike cracked 2 beers from the mini fridge, even though it was barely past noon. "To justice," he said. "Smells like shrimp?" I answered, and for the first time since the storm we both laughed. It wasn't over. Not even close. But the War Council had met, the first strike was in motion, and for once I wasn't playing defense. By the time Brooke came home that night, the shrimp shells in Colin Reed's Audi were already fermenting into legend. I'd spent the day at the shop, running tools through my hands just to keep from putting fists through walls. It worked. The motions were calming, the hum of the planer steady, sawdust piling like fresh snow. When I heard her car in the driveway, I set my tools down and wiped my palms clean. She walked in differently this time. Not the glossy, untouchable woman from last night, but someone already chewed on by the machine she'd built. Mascara tracks cut through her foundation, and the blazer she wore looked slept in. She didn't even make it past the doorway before she started in. "They called me into HR," she blurted, voice sharp with panic. "Policy review. Suspension pending outcome." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, and let her words hang in the air. The storm from last night had passed, but in our kitchen it was still rolling. "They're saying inappropriate conduct, fraternization with management. Colin isn't even taking my calls." Her voice cracked, but I didn't move to comfort her. Comfort was for people blindsided. I wasn't anymore. "You did this?" she snapped finally, eyes wet but hard. "You sent those messages to his wife, to the office. Do you realize what you've done to my career?" I picked up a rag and started wiping down a wrench I'd already cleaned twice. "Actions, consequences," I said. "You wrote the script. I just hit send." She stormed off to the bedroom, bags under her eyes, heels stabbing the floor with each step. I followed, Not out of pity, but because something in her panic smelled off. Too much desperation for just one bad night at HR. Her gym bag sat half-zipped by the closet. I pulled it open, rifled through shoes and leggings until my hand hit the zipper pocket. That's where I found it. A second phone. Cheap burner, screen cracked but functional. I thumbed it on. No passcode. Maybe she thought I'd never look, or maybe she just wasn't as smart as she believed. The screen lit up with notifications, hotel confirmations, voice notes, photos that turned my stomach. Not a fling. Not a moment of weakness. A second life. Weekend trips mapped out, calendar invites, voice memos dripping with promises. She came back into the room as I scrolled. Her eyes went wide when she saw the phone in my hand. "That's private," she said, voice breaking. "This isn't private," I told her, holding the phone up like evidence in court. "This is a ledger. Every lie, every mile, every damn secret meeting. You didn't just cheat, you built a system for it." She started babbling, tears mixing with anger, the kind of frantic talk people use when the walls finally close in. "I never meant for it to go this far. It was supposed to be harmless, just an escape. I love you, I do, I cut her off. Maps don't draw themselves. Reservations don't book themselves. You don't accidentally live two lives." Her knees buckled, and she sank onto the edge of the bed, mascara streaks cutting down her cheeks. "We can handle this like adults," she pleaded, voice trembling. "We can work through it, talk it out. Don't throw away everything." I crouched in front of the safe, spun the dial, and pulled out the deed. My father's name, then mine, stamped clear across the page. Bought and paid for before I ever said "I do." I laid it flat on the dresser, right where her eyes couldn't avoid it. "This house was mine before you ever walked through the door. You wanted independence, Brooke. Turns out you've still got it." Her shoes started going into boxes before she even realized what was happening. One pair after another, stacked neat, labels written in Sharpie. She tried to stop me, hands shaking, words tumbling out, but I kept my motion steady. No shouting, no bargaining, just order reclaiming itself where chaos had lived too long. By the time I closed the safe again, the room smelled like cardboard and perfume. She sat on the bed staring at the deed, face hollow, as if the paper itself had stolen her last alibi. "Adults handle things by owning them," I said, sliding the burner phone across the dresser toward her. "This is yours. So are the consequences." I walked out, leaving her with boxes, a deed she couldn't touch, and a silence louder than any storm. Brewer's on Main was the kind of coffee shop that smelled like ambition. Burnt espresso, pastries no one actually finished, tables full of laptops, and people pretending to write novels. I'd never liked the place. Too polished, too curated. But it was neutral ground, and neutral was what Lisa Reed needed. She was already there when I walked in, sitting at a corner table with her hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only thing keeping her upright. She wasn't polished like Brooke. No perfect blowout, no designer dress. But her posture told me she wasn't weak either. Her eyes were red, but not from crying. Red from fury contained so tight it burned. I slid into the chair across from her and set a manila envelope on the table. Inside were the copied screenshots, the timestamps, the hotel receipts from Brooke's burner phone. Evidence plain and cold. She didn't reach for it right away. She just stared at the envelope like she already knew every piece of filth inside. "He didn't even try to hide it," she said finally, voice flat. I knew something was off, but I thought, stress, work, anything but this. "That's what I thought too," I said, until I stopped thinking and started looking. She finally pulled the envelope open, slid the papers out, and started scanning. Her face didn't break. No tears, no gasps, just a slow hardening like a concrete setting in place. By the time she reached the last page, her jaw was clenched tight enough to crack teeth. "Thank you," she said, pushing the papers back into the envelope. "Not for the pain, for clarity." We sat in silence for a moment, two strangers bound by the same wound. Around us, the hiss of the espresso machine and the clatter of cups felt like background noise in a world that had narrowed to betrayal and consequence. "So what now?" she asked. I leaned back, folded my arms, and spoke plain. We put it in the light. People like Colin and Brooke thrive in shadows. Half-truths, whispered excuses, backroom lies. We strip that away, and they've got nothing left to stand on. She looked at me sharply. You're talking about going public. I'm talking about accountability, I said. Screenshots archived, dates lined up, no theater, no exaggeration. Just the truth where everyone can see it. Let them drown in their own choices. Lisa took a long sip from her mug, considering. You know what happens when you post something like that in Millbrook? It spreads. Fast. That's the point. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she nodded. She pulled out her phone, opened the community page. Millbrook's Gossip Mill dressed up as neighborly updates and started typing. Together we went over the details. Dates, times, just enough evidence to kill the rumors before they could twist the story. No speculation, no slander. Just truth, clean and sharp. When she finished, she slid the phone across the table for me to read. I scanned it, found nothing to correct, and pushed it back. Your call, I said. Her thumb hovered for a beat, then tapped publish. The post hit like a brick through a stained glass window. Within minutes, comments started stacking. Gasps, outrage, confirmation from people who had seen things, but hadn't wanted to say. Shares multiplied. The town that Brooke had paraded through like a queen was now holding up a mirror she couldn't dodge. Lisa set her phone down and exhaled, the kind of breath you take when you've been holding your lungs hostage for months. It feels like opening a window in a smoky room, she said quietly. I nodded. Let the air in. Let the smoke out. She looked at me then, really looked, and I saw the steel under the grief. Not a woman broken, but a woman recalibrating. They thought they could control the narrative, she said. They were wrong. I left Brewers with the sun high and the town buzzing like a hornet's nest. Brooke's name already trending in a place where trends usually meant bake sales and high school football scores. For once, the spotlight she craved was on her, but not in the way she'd planned. And I wasn't done yet. By the third day, Millbrook was humming with the kind of electricity you usually only see after a blackout. Everyone knew. Everyone had an opinion. And Brooke, who once thrived on being seen, now looked like a woman shrinking every time she walked out the door. I was splitting kindling on the back porch when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A silver suit stepped out of a black sedan. Colin Reed, still playing the role, tie perfect, salesman's smile plastered on. He smoothed his hair with the same hand he used to send those texts, then walked up my steps like he was pitching me a timeshare. John, he started, voice too bright. Can we talk? I kept my axe in my hand, blade buried in the block, and wiped my palms on my jeans. You've got about 30 seconds before I decide you're trespassing. He hesitated, then tried the first card men like him always play, deflection. Look, this has gotten out of hand. Brooke and I, well, things just happened. She came on strong. I never meant for it to. Stop. My voice cut through the air sharper than the axe. You don't blame her. You don't blame bad luck. You sure as hell don't blame me. You walked into my marriage, into my house, and now you're standing on my porch looking for sympathy. The smile slipped. His eyes skittered and couldn't land on mine for more than a second. For the first time I saw it, the hollow under the polish. He wasn't built for resistance. He was built for mirrors and empty applause. I stepped closer, close enough he could smell the sweat and wood smoke on me. Here's what's going to happen, Colin. You're going to get in your car, you're going to leave this property, and you're going to keep driving until Millbrook's in your rearview. Because the longer you're here, the longer people remember your name. He swallowed hard, Adam's apple bobbing. You don't scare me, he said, but the tremor in his voice told the truth. You should be scared, I replied. Not of me, but of what you've built. Men like you live on reputation, and yours is already rotting faster than the shrimp shells in your Audi. His face went pale at that, confirming he'd found my handiwork. I didn't wait for more excuses. I turned my back, picked up the split wood, and walked inside, leaving him on the porch with his salesman's smile cracked in half. The door shut and the matter was settled. He could stay and be eaten alive by the town, or he could run. Either way, he was finished here. Inside, Brooke was sitting on the couch, phone in hand, scrolling through the latest community posts. Her hands shook with every refresh. Julie Kramer, one of her co-workers, had just posted about workplace romances gone wrong, with a pointed nod toward HR. The comments were brutal but not cruel, just blunt, stripping Brooke of the social circle she'd weaponized for years. When the doorbell's echo finally faded, I walked into the living room, set the axe down by the wall, and laid the house deed on the coffee table. The same deed I'd shown her before. "You kept your independence," I said. My voice was calm, even. "Turns out, so did I." She looked at the paper like it was a death sentence, tears welling but unshed. For once she didn't argue, didn't perform. She just sat there, small in a way I'd never seen her. I left her with the deed and the silence of a town that had already passed its verdict. Mike called before sunrise, his voice sharp with that edge men get when they're grinning even though they shouldn't be. "Channel 8, turn it on." I wiped the sleep from my eyes, clicked the remote, and there it was. Colin Reed's silver Audi perched crooked on a tow truck outside the seaside motel. A Channel 8 reporter stood in the parking lot, umbrella shaking in the wind, talking about a disturbance and neighbors complaining of shouting. Behind her, a neon sign flickered vacancy like a joke the universe had written for me. The camera zoomed in on the Audi as the reporter said, "Authorities were called after multiple guests reported an altercation. The vehicle is being impounded for further inspection." I didn't need to hear the rest. I knew exactly what they'd find when they popped that hood and turned on the vents. Millbrook would be talking about that stench for weeks, and every time they did, Colin's name would sit at the center of it like a rotten pearl. By mid-morning, Brooke stumbled through the front door, dragging herself like a woman who'd spent the night in a fire. Her eyes were ringed in red, her hair a mess, and her perfume couldn't mask the smoky stench of motel rooms and desperation. She dropped her bag by the door, collapsed into a chair, and muttered, "He won't answer me. He won't take my calls." Her voice was thin, like a balloon losing air. I poured myself coffee, letting the silence stretch until she looked at me. "You had something to do with this, didn't you?" she asked, desperation sharpening into accusation. I sipped slow, the steam curling past my face, and gave her the only answer that mattered. Silence. She hated silence more than shouting. She slammed her palm against the table, shaking the mug. "Don't play games with me, John. Did you touch his car?" I set the mug down and looked her in the eye. Calm. Steady. "Colin Reed is not my problem anymore. He's yours." Her breath hitched, anger fighting with panic, but there was nothing left in her arsenal. Colin had stopped picking up. Lisa had handed him divorce papers in a hotel lobby crowded with witnesses, and Brooke had nowhere to run but back into the house she no longer owned. When she finally left hours later, suitcase rolling behind her, I noticed what she didn't take. The wedding ring sat on the dresser. The anniversary necklace lay tangled on the nightstand. The diamond earrings, my gift after her last promotion, still rested in their velvet box. Shiny promises abandoned in neat rows. I gathered them into my palm, heavy and cold, and realized something. She hadn't left them by accident. She'd left them because they no longer meant anything to her. And to me, they meant something else entirely, proof that you can't pawn loyalty once it's broken. The 6 o'clock news replayed the motel segment, anchorman's voice dry and detached, but I didn't watch twice. I stood on the porch instead, coffee warm in my hand, and let the evening settle. The storm was gone, the air sharp with salt from the bay, and the only sound was the gulls circling overhead. For the first time in 12 years, the house was quiet in a way that didn't feel empty. Felt like mine. The sound was faint at first, floorboards creaking above me while I locked up the shop. At first I thought it was the house settling in the night air, but then came the scrape of a box being dragged. Too deliberate, too alive. I grabbed the old Louisville slugger I kept by the back door and climbed the attic steps, each creak sharp in the silence. The air grew hotter, dust swirling under the single bulb as I pushed the hatch open. Brooke was up there, crouched by a stack of storage bins, flashlight in one hand and a manila folder in the other. She froze when she saw me, eyes wide, like a raccoon caught in the beam. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, voice low but heavy. She stammered, clutching the folder tight. I just needed some papers. For work. I thought. Don't." I cut her off, pulling my phone from my pocket. With one tap the camera was rolling, red light blinking in the dusty air. "You're in my attic, Brooke. Those aren't your papers. Say what you're doing." She shook her head, mascara smeared, sweat glistening on her temples. "Turn that off, John. Please. This isn't." "Say it," I repeated, calm as stone. At first she tried the old dance. Denials, excuses, claims that I was twisting things. But silence is a weapon when you know how to wield it. I just stood there, phone raised, bat at my side, letting the seconds stretch until her own words betrayed her. "I needed money," she whispered finally. "I thought, maybe you kept cash up here with the business files. I'm broke, John. Colin's gone, HR's done with me, and I don't have anything left." Her voice cracked, but I kept the camera steady. "Keep going," I said. Tears welled up. "I ruined everything, okay? I lost the job, I lost Colin, I lost you. I thought maybe I could at least take something to get out of here." That was the line I'd been waiting for. Not just guilt, not just fear, confession. The truth in her own voice, recorded, undeniable. I stopped the recording, slid the phone back into my pocket, and looked at her for a long beat. She was shaking, the folder forgotten at her feet. "You always wanted independence," I said quietly. "Congratulations. You're on your own now." She sagged against the boxes, sobbing into her hands, but I didn't offer comfort. Comfort was for the innocent. Later that night, Mike and I gave her Honda Civic the same seafood treatment we'd gifted Colin's Audi. Rotten justice, pungent and unforgettable. When she slid behind that "will next," she'd carry the smell of her choices everywhere she went. By sundown, Lisa Reed had the recording in her inbox, and within the hour, it was on the Millbrook community page. No spin, no commentary. Just Brooke's own voice admitting the theft, the affair, the ruin. The comments weren't cruel. They didn't need to be. They were conclusive. She said it herself. No rumors now. Truth in her own words. That night I sat on the porch, bat leaning against the rail, and listened to the crickets. The town no longer had questions. Neither did I. Tara Simmons lived in a glass and steel palace out on the dunes. The kind of beach house that screamed money inherited, not earned. Brooke used to spend weekends there sipping cocktails, laughing too loud, reminding everyone she was in the circle. So when Tara invited us to talk like adults, I knew it wasn't compassion. It was a theater. I showed up alone first, boots heavy on marble floors, and walked into a room already buzzing. Half of Brooke's so-called friends were there, perched on white leather couches, phones in hand like reporters waiting for the press conference. Their eyes tracked me as I crossed the room. Some offered tight nods, others looked away. No one smiled. The double doors swung open a few minutes later, and Brooke froze on the threshold. She wasn't magazine-ready this time. Makeup caked under tired eyes, hair hanging flat, shoulders bent under a weight she couldn't shrug off. When she spotted the crowd, her face drained. "This isn't fair," she muttered. I stepped forward and blocked the doorway long enough to force her hand. "Truth now or truth on loop," I said. My voice carried, steady and unyielding. "Your choice." She looked around the room. Tara smirking behind her wine glass, old co-workers with their cameras ready, neighbors who used to clap for her at charity galas. No allies, no exits. Her lips trembled. "Fine," she said, voice thin. "You want the truth? You'll get it." The words spilled like a dam cracking. She admitted the affair with Colin, the motel, the burner phone, the attic break-in. Each sentence stripped another layer of armor, until she was just a woman cornered by her own reflection. And then came the line that snapped the air out of the room. "I was dying of boredom," she said, hands clenched into fists. "That's why. Not because of love, not because of Colin. Because I was bored." The sympathy that had been hanging by threads evaporated in an instant. You could see it in their faces, disgust, judgment, that sharp turn when people realize they've been backing the wrong horse. Even Tara lowered her glass. I let the silence sit, heavy and undeniable, before asking the only question that mattered. Where's Colin now? Her eyes darted, desperation clawing back. Gone, she admitted. He left me. He left everything. The room erupted with murmurs, phones buzzing as the confession spread. Brooke swayed on her heels, clutching her purse like a lifeline. When she stumbled toward the deck stairs, the bag spilled open, lipstick, tissues, receipts scattering across polished wood. She scrambled to gather them, but no one bent down to help. By the time she fled through the glass doors, the only sound left was the surf outside and the faint chime of someone's phone recording still running. I stood in the center of the room, hands at my sides, and let the silence wash over us. Brooke Walker had built her world on image and applause. Tonight, in front of the same crowd she once ruled, she'd burned it down with her own words. I didn't smile, didn't gloat, just turned, walked out, and let the ocean wind hit my face. Justice didn't always need a gavel. Sometimes it just needed a room full of people holding up a mirror. Dawn broke soft over Millbrook, the kind of sunrise that painted the bay gold and made you forget storms ever happened. I was on the porch with my first cup of coffee when I heard the slip of paper under the front door. Brooke's handwriting. A short letter. You win. I'm leaving town. That was it. No apologies worth the ink, no explanations. Just surrender scribbled on lined paper. I let it fall back to the floor where it belonged. By mid-morning, Mrs. Lawson from 2 doors down knocked with a basket of muffins and all the news a small town carries. Julie Kramer had been promoted into Brooke's empty chair at the office. Apparently HR wasted no time. Colin Reed was blacklisted without anyone needing to say it aloud. Unemployable, was the whisper. Lisa had already filed for divorce, and most folks agreed she'd walk away clean while Colin walked into the shadows. The circle Brooke used to hold court over was already moving on. Their sympathy dried up and replaced with gossip about who'd seen what and when. Brooke had gone from queen to cautionary tale overnight. I took the muffins, thanked Mrs. Lawson, and went down to the pier that afternoon. The bay looked scrubbed clean, waves slapping against pilings, gulls wheeling overhead. I leaned on the rail and breathed in deep, salt and wood mixing in my chest. For the first time in months, maybe years, my lungs felt full. A text buzzed on my phone from an unknown number. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I deleted it without opening the thread. Some things don't deserve a reply. Back at the house, I opened the dresser drawer where Brooke had left the symbols of what we once were. The wedding ring, the necklace, the earrings. I held them in my hand, cold metal heavy against callous skin. They weren't trophies. They weren't regrets. They were reminders of a life that had cost me more than I ever thought I'd pay, but had also given me clarity I didn't know I needed. I set them back in the drawer, closed it, and walked out to the porch as the sun dipped low. Millbrook settled quietly around me. No shouting, no phone alerts, no storm. Just the steady hum of crickets and the slow tick of the old wall clock inside. Winning, it turned out, didn't sound like cheers or parades. It sounded like your own breath, steady and unbroken. I sat back in my chair, coffee warm in my hand, and chose who I was going to be next.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.